All right, welcome to the Unstoppable Growth podcast. We're so excited that you joined us, whether it is here on the YouTube channel or listening to one of the podcast platforms. We are so glad that you decided to tune in and listen in today. We are without a podcast guest. Now, don't shut off the video immediately. Don't push pause. Don't push play on your podcast. We got something great lined up for you. Maybe even better than a guest.
It depends on the guest.
It depends.
What are you saying? We didn't have a bad guest.
We didn't have a bad guest.
We haven't yet, no.
But we've had, some are more interesting than others.
It depends.
For me,
Yeah.
and then there's others that are more interesting for you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, what we find interesting, others may not.
Others may not. So my perspective of interesting is not the absolute right perspective. Is what my
It's tough when that becomes a reality, isn't it?
is nodding in the background. All right, so we are excited because, for us, for Rebecca, myself, and for us, I'm just fixing my microphone as usual. We want to continue to grow, so we read lots of different books on growth. Some of the books that we're reading at the moment, one is from Andrew Womack called Spirit, Soul and Body. Come on, somebody. We're reading that with some unstoppable leaders. I'm reading Straightforward Financial Growth by Moses Mukiza. I'm reading this book, which is just incredible, from John Maxwell, 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. And so we want to continue to grow. We want to continue to expand not just knowledge, but wisdom. Wisdom is applied knowledge. When you gain knowledge and you apply it in the right way, you are becoming wise. If you're not, you're just gaining knowledge, which is good, but limited.
Okay.
And so I want to kick us off here with the first law that John Maxwell talks about. And he says, if you want to grow, you need to be intentional. It's called the law of intentionality. Now, first of all, the big question is, do we want to grow? What would your answer be there, Brian, Rebecca?
Yes, I do.
You do.
I haven't always felt that way. There have been points in my life where I've been very happy where I was. I shouldn't have been, but I was. And then there were times where maybe I wanted to grow. I can think of times in my career. And I wasn't motivated enough. I didn't have the discipline. I wasn't passionate enough about it. But I'm at a point now in my life where I am excited to grow, especially in my spirit, in terms of growth there.
Yeah, and we'll be looking at different things that John Maxwell talks about that are sort of like roadblocks to growth. And we talk about them a lot at Unstoppable Growth. They're very similar. For some reason or other, he must have read our book before he wrote his own book, but for some reason they're very similar. They're probably always the same, these kind of roadblocks. But have you always wanted to grow, Rebecca?
Yes and no. It's always, for me, growth is very close to change.
Yeah.
And then so often you talk more about change and growth comes naturally, but both of it is, a lot of it you pursue with being intentional. And so not being afraid of the growth.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it was maybe more the pressure of, like, you can't do this Excel sheet yet, so you have to learn, or how to change diapers or whatever. And then you're forced to learn, and then you're not pursuing it so much as a change. And then you realize, not only I changed, I actually grew a lot by it as well.
Yeah.
And so now knowing, not being afraid of it, and rather let's go after it quicker, the easier it is to grow.
Yeah, I think my big problem with growth is that you have to be humble to grow. Like, you have to be able to say, I'm wrong. You have to be able to say, there's another way. You have to be able...
Or I don't know.
You have to be able to follow somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Allow somebody else to tell you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And those are some things that over the course of my life have been really difficult, to be humble and say, okay, I don't know it all. I need to grow. If I want to grow, I need to accept that fact and learn from it. And John Maxwell, before he gets to the law of intentionality, he says, everybody should want to grow. To discover your purpose, you need to grow in self-awareness. To become a better human being, you need to grow in character. To advance your career, you need to grow in skills. To be a better spouse or parent, you need to grow in relationships. To reach financial goals, you need to grow in your knowledge about how money works. To enrich your soul, you need to grow spiritually. So we would say, whether that's the spiritual capital, physical capital, relational capital, intellectual capital, you need to grow. If you want to expand that in your life, you need to find ways of growing that capital in your life. And, the Bible talks about this in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 17. Peter says, "You therefore, beloved, since you know this beforehand, beware lest you also fall from your own steadfastness, being led away with the error of the wicked. But grow in grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ." And all of the epistles, all of Paul is always talking about, whether we're talking about, we were talking about praying in the Spirit, or, the different gifts of prophesying and how we can equip one another. That's all contingent on people wanting to grow. Yeah. Leaders wanting to grow and helping other leaders grow, or just people wanting to see more of God in their life. If you want to see more of God in your life, you have to be willing to grow. You can't stay where you are, and decide it's a good place to be and grow. You can't come closer to God without venturing out of your comfort zone and growing. You can't experience your God-given purpose if you don't grow. You can't enrich your relationships, just like John Maxwell said. And I think that's a reason for us all to grow. But what really gets me is a lot of the time we all can say, yes, we want to grow, but when we go through Unstoppable Growth and we have our participants in our small groups, a lot of them really don't want to grow, in the sense that they don't want to be challenged, they don't want to step out of the comfort zone, they don't want to be vulnerable, they don't want to be accountable. And that's why we have a chapter in there that says, here are 3 things that you need if you want to grow. We talk about, first of all, about being humble, humility. If we look at our triangle of relationships, our up, in, and out, we have our relationship to God, where we gain our humility, and then in would be the vulnerability, that we can really share what's on our hearts. And that was like the key to Unstoppable Growth. And I'm sure if you've heard any of the podcasts up until now, that's probably one of the threads that you'll hear throughout all the podcasts is, because people were vulnerable, I was able to be vulnerable. Because I was vulnerable, I changed. And that's the in part. And then we have the out part, which is accountability. A coach or an accountability partner, somebody who's following up and saying, did you do what you set out to do? The next step that you wanted to make, not I wanted for you to make, but that you said you wanted to make, did you follow up? And to have those 3 things in place is just so important for growth. And as we look through the law of intentionality, John Maxwell talks about the different gaps, the different roadblocks, the different things that stop us from growing. And so I'd love to just talk with you, Brian and Rebecca, about these different gaps and how maybe you've encountered them in your life. And maybe, our listeners and our viewers can identify with some of these gaps and they can work on them. They can say, okay, if I want to grow, this is a gap that I need to close. This is a roadblock that I need to overcome. And the first one is the assumption gap. I assume that I will automatically grow. And John Maxwell says, when we were children and growing up, everything grew automatically. Your bodies grew automatically. Yeah. Your knowledge of different things at school grew automatically. Your relationships grew automatically. And then after school, you think growth is just going to continue in an automatic way. You don't have to put effort into growth. But that, of course, is not the case. The problem is that we don't improve by simply living. We have to be intentional about it. Have you ever had that in your lives where you feel like growth comes automatically?
Well, it's kind of, even if I think back of both of our boys had those growing pains when they became teenagers. And so if you look at children, you grow, and as a parent, you realize they need another pair of shoes, not because they're destroyed, they actually grew out of it, or the clothing is too small or too big. So there are times that you think growing, like looking at your children, it just happens naturally anyway.
Yeah.
Until they reach the age of, it was connected with pain. Not everything comes so smooth.
Yeah.
And so there is, like, you have to start earning money or making sure. So there's some pressure points always off. And so it's almost finding a yes for the pressure point. And I think too, with having Unstoppable, and you mentioned before, they kind of want to grow, but they don't want to have to grow, because we all know it will cost me something.
Yeah.
And so very often, so even being married to you and you coming up with a new idea, sometimes I think it's not just my struggle finding a yes for the new idea, is being aware it'll cost me something. It's not just a yes. It's maybe timing looks different, or our finances go less in this direction, more in this direction. And the older you get, the more I'm aware of what it could cost me. And then sometimes you're afraid, or I'm afraid to say yes because I do like my routines or my certain areas.
How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I can think of, a time in my career where I had been moving up pretty fast, from rep to manager to director to senior director. And I was probably a little bit cocky, and a new boss came in and he challenged me, which was awesome. But I was probably 6 or 7 years in, thought I knew it all. It was funny you mentioned Excel. That was one of it. It was like, hey, you've got to get better at the operational stuff.
Yeah.
And just in my arrogance, I didn't take those steps.
Yeah.
Right? And that definitely put a ceiling into where I was going to go with that company.
Yeah.
To get to a promotion, I had to leave. And that was on me. I assumed, because I had some earlier success, I had everything I needed to get all the promotions I wanted. And I didn't. And someone took the time to say, hey, here's what you need to get to the next level. And I thought, I'm good. What do you know? I've been here for 7 or 8 years. You're the new guy. That cost me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
right? And I think that was just assuming I knew everything. I knew more than this guy.
Yeah.
And it did end up hurting my earning potential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember thinking through this the first time when I was like a teenager, and I was doing my apprenticeship, and there was an older guy who had 40 years of carpentry. So I was doing an apprenticeship as a carpenter. He had 40 years of carpentry under his belt. And so he was a really good carpenter, but he hadn't personally grown. He was a very hard person, very frustrated, very angry. And he showed it not just to me, but to everybody who worked with him. And it was difficult to work with him. And I remember just reflecting on my experiences with him, just thinking, here's somebody who is so old, has had so many great experiences in their lives, but hasn't been able to capitalize them to grow into a loving, caring human being. And then, I look down the ladder and there's another worker there. He was in his 30s and had half the experience or less than half the experience that this guy had, but was just such a great leader. Such a great worker. If he wanted anybody to work, everybody put their hand up.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to join his team. Everybody wanted to go out with him. He was a carpenter who left the carpentry shop and went out to the houses and fixed everything up in the houses. I was like praying and hoping the boss would always place me with him because it was just such a rewarding experience. And he understood that he needs to be intentional about his growth, and things need to happen. And that's where I first sort of, not maybe first, but where I've really engaged with the thought of, okay, if I intentionally grow, I can become a leader like him in half the time he had to become a terrible leader, to be quite
Would you say it's because you're more the visionary? You see those kind of possibilities anyway, and then, okay, if I want to get there, this is what I need. Because I'm not so much the visionary. And even if I think my last experience is when we planted the church and I started working, like having a career there was never part of my, even thinking I would have it to have a career there wasn't even on my agenda. It was just, I just go to work and I do. And then I got promoted and promoted and promoted, but it wasn't, that's my plan. Until I realized, oh, now I'm this level, then realizing that's I'm lacking off. Also, I'm not the best with numbers. So I really had to get better with the numbers and stuff.
No, I think you're totally right. I think you're totally right. And that's what we talked about this once in one of our podcasts. I think it was your podcast that I just listened to that went live a couple of weeks ago, where we talked about how somebody needed to step in and challenge you to, take a position, grow your potential, do something different. And it's such a great point that you're making. Different people grow in different circumstances. And some people see it and want to grab it, and some people, don't and need somebody to help them see it. But all of us at some point, at some stage, like you said, come to the point where you have to grow.
Yeah. Where you have to make a decision. What am I going to do with that about it now? Is it, am I just letting it slide and not growing? I'm ignoring it, or am I going to dig in and work on it and get to the best one?
Yeah, I mean,
it's true. We both have to make a decision.
Yeah, and your personality really, as you grow, you see the roadblocks that you need to overcome. And that's the great thing about it's not driven by a vision, it's just driven by determination. And that's awesome.
One of the most awesome things I've experienced is I was never intentional about my relationship with God until Unstoppable Growth.
Yeah.
I was a believer, but I was not intentional about it. And when I went into Unstoppable Growth kind of thinking, I'll go all in and see what happens.
Yeah.
Once you start to take those steps of faith, amazing things happen.
Yeah.
Like you can't, I didn't plan out, here's what I want to do over the next 12 months as I want to focus on getting closer to God. I just prayed, read the Bible, spent time with the community.
Yeah.
And God is just putting these things in front of me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I look back now and I'm like,
yeah,
this is where I was a year ago or a year and a half ago before Unstoppable Growth.
Well, that's the thing. So what you're saying is God places people, situations, groups of people in your path, which open up your perspective to see potential for growth.
Yeah.
And I remember, Pastor Joel coming to me and my team, when I joined Seco's staff, my team was about 6 or 7 people. And then it went down to about 4 people. And then it went down to 3 people or 2, because people were transitioning from team to team. And I was like...
And your work decreased, obviously, as you lost people.
Work decreased? No. So we're having that conversation with each other. I'm saying the work is still there.
Yeah.
And the team is decreasing. And he said to me, Tim, look, there's a reason why we're doing this. And he said, I believe in you. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, you're a 5-talent leader. You can make this work with less people. And, at the beginning, I thought he was like,
I've heard that in the business meetings too.
You're so good. You can do this.
You just light up half my team.
So in German, we call it the blaue Peter. There's the black Peter, which isn't talking about racially black. It's a card game. And whoever's left with the Peter at the end loses the game. And there's a blue Peter is when you promote somebody. You promote somebody out of their role, a bad situation or whatever. But anyway, so I remember just listening to that advice and saying, okay, and it took me totally out of my comfort zone, and I had to rethink everything that I did so that we could accomplish
the same with less.
And it grew me immensely, and I'm so thankful for it. I was frustrated at the beginning, but so thankful for it now. All right, the second gap that he talks about, what time is it now? Have we're 20 minutes in or something like that?
Yeah.
The second gap that he talks about is the knowledge gap. I don't know how to grow. And that is definitely something, an excuse sometimes that we give ourselves. We don't know how to grow. Thoughts?
I think it's an excuse. I'm sure I've used it in the past. There are people out there who want to help.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who want to help, whether it's in the church or outside of the church. I think if you humble yourself and say, like, I want to learn this and I'm going to start asking questions.
Yeah.
If I don't know if it's this John Maxwell book or another one, he just talks about, like, I reached out to everyone that I admired. I just wanted to line up as many mentors as possible.
Yeah.
So I think the knowledge gap, like, there's so much knowledge out there. It's not even that hard to get it anymore.
Yes.
You've got to take that step, intentional.
Yeah.
And you can find any information you need these days.
Yeah.
And you can find a mentor.
Yeah, totally.
To me, the knowledge gap is a pride gap.
Yes.
To the pressure on I should know or I know, instead of, like you just said, being humble and also have enough relationships around me to go and ask for help. Very often we became lonely and we're not in relationships anymore. And so the more lonely you are, yes, the harder it is to bridge this gap again from pride and to maybe helplessness to go and ask again. But very often for me, it's a pride thing I even remember in our marriage, for you, it's not the not knowing. For you, it's more the convenience. Or just ask Rebecca, where's what, for example, instead of you go and look for yourself. And in the beginning, I really made a task for me. I really want to know. And I answered you so quickly. And with that, sometimes even gave you an answer, even though I didn't know, but it was more, well, you expected it. I always had the answer. You better keep up with it. And I remember when one time, I think we had a conflict about that too. And then I had to really tell myself and allow myself to say, I don't know, which was uncomfortable for you because it meant you have to pick it up again and start looking for it. You cannot just wait for me. But for me, I didn't care so much about you in that moment. It was for me a pride thing to admit, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a part of this knowledge gap. It's not that you don't have the knowledge. It's that you don't want to humble yourself to receive the knowledge, to receive the instruction. And I love that.
You have to seek it.
To seek it.
Get it,
All right, number 3, the knowledge gap is number 2. Number 3 is the timing gap. It's not the right time to begin. And so he's talking about another excuse that we come up with, but it's an excuse that I've heard time and time again. And I do it myself the whole time. I'm like, it's time to read another chapter in this book. No, I'm going to look at another Netflix show. It's time to, do that chore back at home. No, I'm going to go out and walk the dog. You know what I mean? So there things that are not easy are easy to put off. And so I procrastinate, and I think that's, for me, that's sort of like the big thing here. When I say it's not the right time to begin, it's really me procrastinating. How about you guys?
I mean, I procrastinated my life away for a long time. So this one hits home for sure. I didn't want to mature. I didn't want to grow up. So the timing was never right, whether that was like getting married. I was 35 when I got married. I was dating Danielle for almost 7 years.
Yeah.
By the way, tomorrow's our 14th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, she congratulated me this morning too. Like, you made it 14. I'm like, I think I'm good now.
It's my testimony.
Yeah, like I
story.
think I should be in a better place. Yeah, but when I read the book and that the timing gap, I was just like, everything in my life was like, I don't want to get married yet. I don't want to have kids yet. I don't want to commit my life to God. Like, you get to a point, I'm almost 50, where you're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
I waited too long for certain things.
Yeah. And that's exactly what he says here. The law of diminishing intent, which is what we're talking about here in the timing gap. The longer you wait to do something you should do now, the greater the odds that you will never actually do it. So the longer you push something out, the greater the percentage becomes that you'll never actually put it into action. Rebecca?
Do it anyway.
Do it anyway. So you never have a problem with procrastination?
I do. But there are some things, even thinking of how I eat my plate. I eat first what I like less, and I keep my favorite thing on the plate.
So you go for the pain first, and then
yes.
Where I bet you keep your vegetables on the plate and eat them at the end.
I might not even eat them.
But it is true with getting older. You can change some things to still do them, or like cleaning the house. I normally start with the things I don't like because they need to be done anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's almost keeping the dessert for the end. I remember even with the children, we trained them to eat. I put the dessert on the table but the way to the dessert is through the vegetable and through the kind of like they could see it, what is my path,
That's good.
that's the path I would do it.
That's so good. All right, closing off the timing gap. I love this. 5 frogs are sitting on a log. 4 decide to jump off. How many frogs are left?
5 minus 4.
Yes.
1.
1.
0.
0. Why 0?
Probably when the 4 jump off, the other one falls off.
Falls off. Well, he says the answer is 5. Why? Because there's a difference between deciding and doing. I love that. I know it's cheesy, but it's so good because it's so true. You know, 4 decide. How many times have we made a decision only to not follow through? And that is the big thing there. Number 4, the mistake gap. I'm afraid of making mistakes. That's a big one.
It is.
That's a big one.
I think nowadays anyway with social media, where you feel everything is visible. The older days, sometimes I felt you can hide it more, and now it's so much of presentation, and so making mistakes, losing your face, like everybody gets to see everything.
Yes.
That's always. But then on the other hand, when we talk non-stop about being vulnerable, this is exactly when hearts can connect. If everything is always great and everybody is perfect, it's encouraging, but it's also boring. Yeah. It's like a level it's hard to achieve as well, or it's hard to see yourself with. But if someone can see how, and it's even admitting mistakes and then taking people on the process, this is how they can learn from you how to go after. Because very often we see just the now and after. We don't see the process. So like, how do you solve a conflict? How do you do that now with your children? And if we hide all our mistakes, then the people, even the close ones around us, miss out. Yeah. So like even in my case, my parents, I know they had conflicts. I just never heard them fighting, or I never experienced it. I felt the tension, but then they moved in their bedroom and came out and everything was fine again. Yeah. I missed the part of how did you solve it? And so when we got married, I was just quiet. I just thought, I just have to keep it together, because I missed the mistake kind of, and the solving of the mistake. And so...
And I wanted open warfare.
You got these little parents habits.
Maybe I'm just the exception to the rule, but I wanted to take it all out. I don't care who's around. But yes, afraid of making mistakes. He says, this is the price of admission if you want to improve. Mm-hmm. A mistake is simply another way of doing things. To become intentional about growing, expect to make mistakes every day. Welcome them as a sign that you are moving in the right direction. Yes. I love that. It's so counterintuitive. Yeah. It's so much against what you think is the right thing to do. But I love what you said, Rebecca, because we don't connect with people when they show us always the bright side of life. Yeah. When they show us how good they are, how great they are, and how they've been able to, accomplish in life. But when they talk about their struggles, I mean, there you go. That's, hey, I can identify with that. Yeah.
Or I could help you with that. Something can be ignited in my life to go and be with these people more.
There is nothing more powerful than hearing like whether it's a business person or a celebrity or a sports star admit mistakes. It's so infrequent when you do hear it, like Tom Brady admitting, like, hey, my first day doing the play-by-play, I kind of stunk. Yeah. I need to work on it. I need to get better. Week 2, he was awesome. Yeah. So it is really cool to hear people be like, yeah, it wasn't that great. Here's why, and here's what I'm going to do. Yeah. It's that vulnerability.
So good. All right, we got the perfection gap and then the inspiration gap. I just mentioned quickly the perfection gap, which is, of course, the problem, the challenge with appearing. You have to appear to be perfect. You want others to regard you as the best way, and you won't start to do something until it's the very right thing to do. And of course, that never ever happens, because you're always going to make mistakes, as we looked at before, and that is like he said, the price of admission. But the thing is, you have to start immediately, start soon, and you have to start before you're perfect.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the most difficult things to do. And
I feel it depends.
You procrastinate then because it's not going to be a perfect thing.
But I feel it depends on what area. So there's some things, like now, a couple of weeks ago, I started doing our own sourdough bread. And so it is the approach of you go for it and you do, and I know you're going to make mistakes, but it's not, because it doesn't really touch my emotions, or it's just the me thing. I'm learning. Then it's not so hard to. I know it's going to happen. I'm going to be fine. But
it's because you on your own with your dough bread.
Yes. And if it's if it didn't turn out well, you might not even find out about it.
Exactly.
I just knew that I kind of reflect, okay, what can I do next? But then the other things, especially when it's with interaction with people or leading people, then you feel, or you're afraid they might not trust me anymore. Maybe I lose them. And it's a different kind of pressure. And that's why the whole perfectionism, everything has to be right from beginning. Plus, because we are in such a presentation world right now, everything presented. We have the perfect home, we have the perfect families, we have the happy vacation. That if I look at my life and say, no, it's not perfect, then you think I'm failing. And so this has, I think, to do with that too.
Yeah. All right, Brian, what are you thinking? The inspiration gap. I don't feel like doing it.
Well, I think I forget who I heard this from years and years ago, but like motivation only gets you so far. It does come down to discipline. Yeah. Because there are plenty of times, like you, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, so it's like I want to get up and I want to be fired up and take on the world. Yeah. Right. But if I have to get up and work on an Excel spreadsheet or even a PowerPoint, or like organize something, I have zero motivation to do that. Yeah. Right. And over time, I have learned, right, I just have to do it. Yes. Right. These are the 4 things I need to do today. I'm going to get it done, and then I can do the things that actually like inspire me and help me grow. But it's discipline over motivation or inspiration. Do you find like when you start doing the difficult things that you start getting motivation to do it? With certain things, no. I'm never gonna like paperwork, math. Like I don't like it. I get frustrated. I get bored doing it. So I'll do it because I have to, and it's gonna lead to what is going to excite me and motivate me. Yeah. But no, I've never got I've never found it exciting to work on an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. No matter how many times I have to do it, I'm like, ugh. Yeah. There are things that I've filing taxes, for instance, hate it. Getting all the numbers, getting all the expense sheets, getting all the receipts and everything together and making sure everything's right, that the IRS is going to be happy with me. But then actually at the end, after getting everything together and getting an overview of how much has come in, how much has gone out and where it went out and all that kind of stuff, actually started to excite me. Whereas like it's something totally that I'm sure a lot of our listeners doesn't excite, but when you get down into the nitty gritty of some things, it can be motivational at the end. Yeah. Yeah. I've never looked at a spreadsheet, even if it looked good, and thought like, yeah, that was worth it. I think I'll look at it for 5 seconds. But I think no matter how positive you are, or how much enthusiasm you have, you need more than just that kind of motivation to keep going. Yeah. Right. So that's where I think you have to have that discipline. Yeah. That no matter what, I'm going to get this done. Yeah. So good.
And what it is for me too with growth, I was also thinking, these are all practical things, or we know things about, but why do we want to grow? And for me, it has so much to do how I see myself and how I look at myself in the perspective of how God sees me. Yeah. If I'm with me, then alone, then I believe the lies from the devil, you're not good enough, or you're not going to make it, or whatever it is. But it is almost, you can be satisfied with the mediocre that you're in, even maybe you've achieved something, you're on a special level and you're good and you want to keep that, and you eat with it. But then when I look at it as Jesus, my Father in heaven, who sees so much more in me, it's almost like he's my biggest cheerleader. Thinking being a mom and cheering on my children, you approach growth differently if you know someone is totally behind me.
Yeah.
And whatever happens, I'm going to be fine. And so my encouragement is for all the listeners and you watching, is you have a God that believes so much in you and he sees so much in you. And so there's more because of him. And it's on us to develop the discipline and to go after and not to procrastinate till the very end. But if I start looking at myself again, there's this loving Father and I could have more and it's not just on me, then I think I get the courage to pursue growth a bit more and not just to be satisfied. And so that's something we say we want to have unstoppable growth, but it has to be like this free gift. Give me the 1 million, but I don't really want to work for it. I don't want to sacrifice for it. And so we all know that's not life, but knowing I have someone that is behind me, and that's why I can embrace growth. And then I gain so much personally. Looking back is thank you, Jesus, that you helped me in it. But then I learned so much about myself, which I like myself much better than 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And that's something I could experience because of God as well.
Yeah. What I've really been thinking about over the last couple of weeks is like that resurrection power lives in me. Everything, all of that power lives inside of me. And that is motivating to like, I do want to grow because I want to be able to release all of that power. That power is in me. I'm the one holding it back.
Come on.
Right? Can I continue to grow through across all the capitals?
Come on.
So that spirit can come out of me. Again, it's just like, think of like, you're in your mid 80s looking back and it's like, you don't want to have wasted that. Like what a horrible feeling that must be laying there going, I had all of this inside of me and I just, I was scared. I procrastinated. Timing wasn't right. I know that feeling with some things in life. I don't want to feel it again.
Pastor Monroe from the Bahamas says that the wealthiest place you can ever go to is the graveyard. The wealthiest place that you can ever go to is your local graveyard. You go there and you'll see books that have never been written. You'll see songs that have never been sung. You'll see money that's never been made. You'll see relationships that have never connected. Children that have never been produced. You'll see so much that never actually happened.
Crazy.
Absolutely crazy. Because people weren't prepared to grow. Because people wouldn't step out of the comfort zone and do something different so that they could achieve something and bless this world with something. Bless it with a new song, bless it with a new relationship, with a new child, bless it with a book, bless it with a business, bless it with something that God's put on your heart. And, to your point, Rebecca, Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians, who then is Paul and who is Apollos, but ministers through whom you believed as Lord gave to each one. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. And I love that. God causes growth. God can, expand the things that he's planted in your life or that others have planted in your life. And we talk about that. We talk about unstoppable growth is possible because of an unstoppable God. And this isn't a self-help. This isn't just good principles. Of course, they're great principles that can be applied to people who believe and people who don't believe in God. But we believe that God has a purpose. And the God-given purpose over your life is so much more important than any other purpose that you could get anywhere from anyone or anything. And we want to see him grow in you because we believe that's how you'll be fulfilled. We believe that's how you'll find joy. That's how you'll find peace, is fulfilling his purpose for your life. I'm going to close it there. Maybe just quickly, if there's any comments on the last two gaps, the comparison gap, others are better than I am. The expectation gap, I thought it would be easier than this. Anything in the tank there for our listeners, for our viewers?
I think you touched on this earlier, Becca. That comparison gap, it's deadly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I can't even imagine today, when I was growing up, there wasn't social media, but you were still walking down the hall, whether it was high school, college, the office, comparing yourself with everybody that walked by, how they looked, how they dressed. And then in meetings intellectually, how you compare with people. And today with social media, that's all people are doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's just going to cripple your life if you're constantly comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah.
I mean, with both of it really comes back again of, yes, I also struggle with comparison, but now I would say my relationship that I have in Jesus with, I know how he looks at me. There's no comparison anyway. Like, I don't want that people look at me and thinking I will never be like Rebecca.
Yeah.
I don't want them to have this pressure. But how can I empower them to see who they are and what they are capable to do? I want to release them for that, but not, please do not compare with me. If it's the confidence you can have in Jesus, please go after this, but not comparing in a way that slows you down or even stops you for something. And for me, it is more with the expectation. I have always high expectation on myself. It's not so much the expectation, oh, can I fulfill that? My expectation almost go into perfectionism. So it's very much. And so that's more, am I putting my expectation or am I looking at it, God, what is it in there for me? Maybe it is the expectation that he wants, that I can make a mistake today to learn of receiving grace and forgiveness. And because the higher you go, the harder it is to fall down and go back up again. So I never want to be on a high level that it will be so hard to lose connection to everything else that God wants to do. And so for me, expectation is a big...
Yeah, I remember comparing. I mean, I've always struggled with this, comparing myself with other men that were successful. Like as a pastor, you automatically, I mean, size is not just important in other areas. Size is also important in your church. And just comparing, this guy is planted 3 years ago, has X amount of people. I planted 5 years ago. I have less people. What's going on? What did he do better than I did? And just all those comparison things, which can just really ruin your own experience, because you have to run your own race in your own time and with your own purpose. And I love that. And I think I'm coming closer to that as I move through life, that I'm just very happy with my own race. And I feel confident in the place, the area, the relationships, and everything that God's placed me in. I think every man and maybe woman is motivated by progress. I mean, some kind of progress, some kind of forward moving success, fruit, so that you know that your input, your effort is at having some kind of a result. And it's difficult not to have that, but to trust in God and just say, okay, at the moment I don't see the progress, at the moment I don't see the results, but I'm still going to move forward, I'm still going to grow, and I'm going to trust you that you are going to bring the results that you want at the end of this.
And that's what I love in Unstoppable. If you go through Unstoppable and you're part of a group, then you hear those different obstacles, you hear those different challenges, and it automatically puts in a place, I'm not the only one struggling. I'm not the only one not maybe being where I hoped I'm going to be. And so that's the advantage of having people around you and having a similar hope and goal of growth. I know my path looks different than yours, but if I do everything alone, then I never hear about it. But then being part of an Unstoppable group and hearing what they're struggling, and I get to encourage the other person, allow the other person to encourage me. This, I felt, elevated me very much, being vulnerable in a group of actually, this was the biggest growth spurt I had because I wasn't alone anymore.
It's so powerful for men too, because to your point, like, men don't typically want to be vulnerable, or lower their guard, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really share like some of the tough things in life. And it is so awesome when you have a group of men, 5, 6 men getting together and just saying,
Yeah.
here's what's not going well in my life. Here's where I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And it's a domino effect, because once that first man shares, it's like, for most people, it's like, now we can share. Now I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
It happened to me at work in a meeting today, which was really weird, with a client who just started sharing all this stuff. And he was like, sorry guys, I just needed to do that. We're like, not a problem at all. But he said, like, this is something as a man I really struggle with. And
yeah,
we're like, oh, you're on a roll. Keep going.
And is it
so
good? You
good.
think being vulnerable and it's slowing you down, but it's actually going to strengthen you?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I was.
Oh, it's going to speed you up.
Yeah.
Long term.
Yeah.
For sure.
BS.
Yes. Cuts it all.
Yeah,
out.
it's just like, let's be raw, let's be real, and move forward.
And move forward. Oh my goodness.
Facts on the table, and
Don't
that's what
exactly.
you work
Don't
with.
dance around all the stuff and take time and years and years and years of dancing around different topics in your life, and never grow, never experience fruit, never experience multiplication, never experience making other disciples, because you haven't felt confident in your own skin, because you're still circling around all those issues. That's the thing about circling around all those issues. You have to keep them secret. And secrecy really attacks your identity. And that attacks your confidence. And then you can't step out and actually do what you've been called to do. So don't beat about the bush, guys. Let's get to it. Let's be humble. Let's be vulnerable. And let's be accountable to each other. And let's continue to grow and make this growth happen, not just in our own lives, but challenge each other to grow. Join our next Unstoppable Growth 10-week small group program. You can go to unstoppablegrowth.org to find out when the next one is happening. We love you. If you want to connect with us, we love connecting with people. Just write. You can go to the homepage. You'll see contact. Send an email to info@unstoppablegrowth.org. I read them personally and will answer you immediately. All right. Anything else that we need to share at the end?
I think this is great.
Awesome. Rebecca, would you pray with us?
Father, thank you so much that you are with each listener right now, like you are with us. Thank you that you are an unstoppable God. And with being an unstoppable God also means there's so much more possible. And Father, maybe past hurt, past disappointment, past failures, whatever is holding us back or was making us stop for pursuing new things. And I know in you is healing, in you is new hope, and that we all can experience this again and again. Father, that we can let go and receive again, that we can let go and pick up the things that we can run with, so that the growth that you have prepared for us is helping us for breakthrough. And every growth is breakthrough, because we have moments where we realize of where we were and where we get to be right now. So thank you for your hope, that your light is shining into each person's life, and that we get to see what next step we can take, and that growth is a blessing. Growth is multiplication. Growth is provision that you have for each one of us. And we all want your provision. We all want more of you. So thank you that you are a generous God, and that with your help and with people around us, that we get to grow and become more and more like you. Amen.
Amen.
Amen and amen. Our mission is to help you grow in all areas of your life, spiritually, relationally, physically, intellectually, and also financially. Let us know how we can help you and contact us at unstoppablegrowth.org. Have a great week.